All right. Well, I'm excited to be here today with Tim Hoerr. Tim is a longtime leader and innovator in the business realm. He's actually not just been a business leader, but you've actually written two books. Two books. First, Thank God It's Monday, which might tell you something a little bit about Tim's passion for the work that he gets to do and he gets to partner with. And then the second book, Risking It, which is more of a memoir, kind of some of your experiences and the things that you've kind of walked through. My name is Mike Yoder, by the way, for those of you who are listening. I'm senior pastor here at the Vineyard Church, and we're talking today as part of a series that we're doing and talking about this idea that God is the God of our city. And what does that look like in all the different areas of our city? So I'm excited to talk to Tim about that because of this area that he hits in the business world. I've actually known Tim for many years, and you've been a part of this church for over 35 years, a few years since you started, that you were actually out in California and came back. You're actually the brother of Diane Lehman, who's the founding pastor here, and that makes him my wife Julie's uncle, and I guess that you're my uncle-in-law.
There we go, uncle-in-law. I like it.
But currently, he's the founder and CEO of Serra Ventures, which is a venture capital firm that's headquartered right here in Champaign, Illinois, investing in lots of tech startups and a lot of different places, both here in the Champaign-Urbana area, as well as far beyond, all across the nation. In addition to those connections, that my career journey actually intersected directly with Tim's when I came to work for him at a biotechnology firm called Eyesight, where Tim was the CEO, and it was a very formative part of my journey, and just loved what I got to learn and see how Tim operated directly in that role. And so I'm really excited to talk to him a little bit more about some of the things that he's so passionate about. And one of those things that I've always admired in you, Tim, is you have this passion for going after this realm of business, but also partnering that with this idea of the principles of the kingdom of God, and how those same principles that you're passionate about in innovation and entrepreneurship are so tied to kingdom principles, whether that's risking it for God or risking it in that they're all kind of tied together, and that you have this in your own passion, but you also, I see this passion in you to see other people kind of see that come alive in them as well. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, since I've been talking a lot here and this is really about you, but tell us a little bit of background, what made you want to be this entrepreneur and business leader that you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, thanks, first of all, for having me, Mike. I love this topic, and just really enjoying the process of seeing what's happening here at the Vineyard as we face outward, and that we do express a real love and compassion and passion for our city. So, really thrilled to be part of it. So thanks for having me over. It probably goes back to all the way, born in Peoria. I was part of an entrepreneurial family there. My dad was a second generation owner, operator of a family business, a nursery garden center located in Peoria, Illinois. A pretty large operation, actually. I think it was probably the largest in downstate Illinois at the time. It actually still may be. It's run by my younger brother, Nate, now. I think I got put to work in 5th grade, sorting rocks and pulling weeds. So I'm not so sure the entrepreneurial bug started there, but over time, I got to pretty much work in all phases of the business. I really, really enjoyed all aspects of that business, particularly working with the public to beautify their homes and so forth. So that's probably where it started. And then I did go off to school in public accounting. I thought I'd go back to the family business. That actually never happened. Never got a job offer, actually, to go.
I think maybe we should talk to Nate now about that.
Maybe too late.
One bag. It might be a little late for that, I guess.
But I did end up spending about 15 years in public accounting on the management consulting side. So I got to work with a lot of different companies and a lot of entrepreneurs. And I think in seeing how people, how they approached business, how they built their businesses, how they executed on their vision, that really firmly planted the seed. And ultimately, I did have the opportunity to leave the firm. I started my own little consulting company called Life Vision in combination with writing the first book, Thank God It's Monday. So that was sort of the first foray into entrepreneurship. And it kind of grew from there. I had an opportunity to become an owner in Game Day Spirit, which is the official fan store of the Fighting Illini, for those of you that don't know that. And then had an opportunity, as you talked a little bit about eyesight, that was, I met Gary Durak, who was at the university at the time, and the two of us came together to form and develop eyesight, which, was a really incredible opportunity, an incredible journey. And it just kind of went on from there. All of that sort of ultimately led, when we sold eyesight to Sony, it became an opportunity to sort of pay it forward in a sense by forming Serra Ventures and taking some of that capital from the eyesight transaction and rolling it into investments in other companies. So that's the short version of how it all happened.
How it all came together. One of the things that I remember well about, and I didn't have this kind of in our notes, but thinking about that time at eyesight actually won a couple of awards for some of the best places to work in Illinois. Based on some of the culture that I think you were a vital part of creating. How have you seen that culture creation kind of impact the way that you now lead and help work with other businesses in our community and beyond?
Yeah, I call it the Thank God It's Monday culture, or TGIM culture. I sort of did it in reverse. I wrote the book first, and then God sent me to school to actually figure out how to do it. I'd been a consultant, all those years leading up to writing the book. And then it was off to the trenches to actually execute on it. But in a sort of a very abbreviated form, TGIM culture really is about creating an environment where people are challenged in their work. I mean, people want meaningful work. They want significance, sort of as a core human need. So that's sort of number one. And number two, you honor them while they're doing their challenging work, right? You give them space. You create an environment where there is some esprit de corps. You reward them, right? I mean, so you pay them appropriately. You share some of the profits, as it were, of the organization. You recognize, a job well done, and you create this environment where it's excellence, again, done with integrity, done in a kingdom fashion. It isn't really rocket science. But day to day, you create that type of an environment, and that's what we did at Eyesight. To this day, I mean, you mentioned it. I think one of my key takeaways there, one of the most gratifying parts of building that company was the fact that we did win these couple of awards, which validated the environment that had been created there. So that of all the things that Eyesight did, and it was doing some really amazing things, creating scientific equipment that would be used ultimately in disease research. Nothing much more meaningful than that, but yet at the end of the day, our people, I think, felt challenged, honored, recognized, and they enjoyed, doing what they were doing, enjoyed being with each other.
Yeah, I think too. What I was impacted in that process too, and just reflecting. You can reflect back as well. What I hear you saying in that, and what I think I experienced as well, was this idea that if you can create value for the people who are in the organization, who are in the culture, that ultimately that actually is going to come back in greater value as well for the whole organization.
It is, yeah. No, that's exactly right. It turns into a better experience for the customer. A better experience up and down the supply chain with your vendors, your investors. It may seem somewhat counterintuitive, but really ultimately isn't. If we create this kind of an environment and we spend the time and the money to do it, it does ultimately pay us back in all of these other ways. So, I like to say that you can ultimately, you can do well by doing good, right, so to speak.
Yeah. So as you're looking at now in your role of investing in other businesses and other leaders, both, again, right here in our community and our cities that are here and far beyond, how has that impacted the way that you think about coaching them, bringing them along, or who to invest in even in that process?
Yeah, great question. Everything that we do, I mean, I believe fundamentally all truth is God's truth, so that truth permeates every decision we make as investors, as coaches and mentors to the teams that we ultimately invest in. So yeah, it ultimately does start with picking the right teams, right? We probably see 750 different opportunities a year that are potential investments, and we end up probably doing 10 or 12 deals a year. So you have to be really, really selective. That's the hard part about this job, is saying no. And I hate saying no. I hate hearing no, but that's sort of beside the point. But yeah, it really is ultimately about, hey, is this a team, not only that has great capability, but they have they respect one another, and they also have sort of a kingdom attitude, and they may or may not be believers, but a kingdom attitude of teachableness and a willingness to be coached. And so that's then the approach we bring. Hey, if we see, yes, there is great capability here, but there's also sort of a sense of humility, right, and a willingness to be coached, because we are going to want to work alongside of them and bring sort of our collection of experiences and expertise to the table, try to put those two together. And really that's all infused with the kingdom. I wake up every day asking the question, Father, what are you doing today? How can I align with it? I've got decisions to make. I've got portfolio companies to work with. I've got investors to interface with, and what are you saying in kind of the middle of all that?
Yeah, that's super powerful. And I think that, again, I see that underlying principles of the kingdom. What are the same principles that are aligning in business? And as that's where you want to invest, is people who are applying, whether they're believers or not, they're applying principles that are kingdom principles.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Are they doing are they doing really, really meaningful things? Right. Are they solving big problems? Are they doing it with excellence? Are they doing it in a way that really does honor people and serve customers? Those are basic kingdom principles.
I love that. So now thinking more locally, like here within our city, Champaign-Urbana, surrounding area, lots of innovation happening. We've obviously got the University of Illinois. You've got a large hospital system. Lots of opportunity for innovation and entrepreneurship. Experienced that firsthand working within the research park where iSight was located, and Serra Ventures was actually located within.
Yeah, we were there for 10 years before moving to downtown, the urban core of Champaign here just a couple months ago.
That's right. Just till recently, we're right kind of in the heart of it, and now just in a different part of our community and what that looks like. What is the strengths that you see in our local business community in this that make you want to be here and investing from this place and not somewhere far away in a much larger urban setting?
Right. Well, it really does. It goes back to people. I think as most things do in life, we have a lot of really, really talented people here, and they know how to work hard. There is really such a thing called the Midwestern work ethic. Having spent a number of years on the coast, and I do travel back and forth to our San Diego office, there is an ethic in the Midwest that is unique. It's about working hard, and it's about actually being for each other. One of the things I see in Champaign is it's a very small and integrated, relatively tight-knit business community, and we're for each other. Yeah. We really are trying to help each other out. Even competitors in some cases are helping each other out. Imagine that. Wow. So I love that dynamic here, and I think it's pretty unique. And of course we have the innovation core, which is driven by the university. I mean, their decision about 20 years ago to create a tech ecosystem, I think was really, really critical, right? They made a decision to build a research park, put a venture capital firm in place called Illinois Ventures. They put some business people into the tech transfer office to try to get that thing oiled and working in a functional type of a format. That decision, again, about 20 years ago, I think has been super meaningful to now what's happened over the last 20 years. But yeah, those are some of the elements. And you did mention like the health care system. There is a really wonderful foundation of what I would call more traditional businesses here in town, light manufacturing, healthcare, banking and finance and so forth. That foundation, I think, has provided a nice place for the more innovative things to kind of spring out of it. So all of that collectively, makes Champaign-Urbana really an awesome place to work.
Much like the fertile soil of our farm ground, it seems like
it really is.
Definitely some fertile
great
soil.
Way to think about it.
Fertile soil within our community for fostering some of the places of entrepreneurship. I really like that idea. I know that in some way, all of us are interacting with the world of business, whether it's buying your groceries or going to the bank, as you said, or getting gas from the gas station. In some way, you're interacting with some of this business. How do you see the business community of this, of our city here in Champaign Urbana? How do you see it shaping the culture of what people actually experience and what they would call like the culture and life of the city?
Yeah, that's a profound question, actually, and I've thought a lot about that, and particularly as believers in business, we have an opportunity to, I call it just sort of, do our assigned job from the Holy Spirit. We all have a calling on us, and it really is about just executing on the calling by, rendering exceptional service, creating great jobs, delivering great products. So if we can just do sort of those basic things with our eyes and our ears open to, where is the Lord leading specifically, then we can have just a tremendous impact on the community, right? As you said, whether it's as a teacher or an artist or an educator, a stay-at-home mom, all of those elements kind of blending together. Just each of us executing on the calling that we have. You also see a lot of the businesses in town beyond sort of their core mission and vision. They are interested in giving away, so to speak, right? Volunteering, and both financially and with time and money with their employees to support the various nonprofits and churches and so forth. So that's a big component. But probably the biggest thing I think is companies just executing on the core mission and vision that they have, and each of us within those organizations just doing our jobs with joy and with excellence, right? I mean that can have a major impact, and I think that is happening here.
And I hear in that there's power in living out the destiny that you're called to. Right. Even if somebody else is called to something similar, it doesn't take away from what you do. You're talking about competitors working together or businesses working alongside and actually forming relationships that actually help the whole community and support areas of the community that need the financial resources, that need the innovation, the leadership.
Exactly.
That's really good. What are then the challenges that then you see for the businesses or the business leaders who are part of this community that are facing us now?
Yeah, there are always challenges to confront head on and deal with. I know those of us that are believers in business. I think there is a challenge to what is the Holy Spirit doing today? What is the Father doing today? And as believers, I think we're always being asked to step outside of our comfort zone, step outside of whatever wherever we are at the moment, and take a risk to do something new, to grow, to add on a component to what we're already doing. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, that we have as business people is, yes, tending to the farm, so to speak, that's already existing, but how can we hear what the Holy Spirit's saying wherever he may be directing us to take a risk and do it. So that's a big component of a challenge that I think we have. Another one is how does the church help us? We business people are often investing 40, 50, 60 some odd hours a week, and it is easy to lose sight of the fact that we are called in our work, right? And to be, sometimes work can get you down, the challenges and so forth. So how can the church come alongside of us, the church family, so to speak, our small groups, et cetera, and encourage us in our calling? Because, ultimately work is hard. That's why they call it work. Right. So, how can that dynamic happen? And I do think another, a big challenge too is how do we support the least and the lost, so to speak? What is the role of the business community in that? I'm always challenged to think along those lines. How can we do better on that?
Yeah, it's not really just when we talk about it's the church's job to help take care of that. Well, the church is the collection of people who are make that up, and it's also the collection of organizations that are led by people who call the church home. And what does that look like? Because we can't, as the church, we can't solve these problems unless there's people with resources and who are on the ground seeing the needs, actually helping us know how do we help connect the right people into the right places.
Right. Yeah. The challenges and the needs really are endless. I mean, that may sound like a cliche, but it really is true, right? And so in that regard, we need all kinds of people deployed out there, again, individual members of the church, but out in their work setting or their home setting, being empowered to, do what the Lord's shown them to do.
Jumping a little bit, again, outside here, just thinking through as you're talking, how has for you, what has been ways that the church had, maybe there's an example or something of the way that your interaction with this church body or with the bigger C church as a family of God, how have you seen that impact the way that you lead or have made decisions in the past?
Well, number one, I think the church, for me, has provided a real environment of refreshment and encouragement. It's helped me recenter myself, on a week-to-week basis, because it does, the difficulties of any given week can certainly sap energy and so forth, and can kind of help you. You can get off track, so to speak. So that's sort of the core thing. But if, like I think of a specific example, a lot of it again comes back to people and relationships, particularly small groups. We've been part of small groups really since coming here in 1983. So at the end of when we were moving back from California, and I was trying to do this life vision consulting thing. I was sort of experiencing a couple of years where it wasn't going terribly well, and it was sort of a cosmic faceplant, if I could be completely honest. And
a dramatic way, I like that, a cosmic faceplant.
Yeah, no, it was not good. But the thing that really came to me, I guess, in the middle of that very, very, very difficult time, the thing that ultimately brought me back from the edge, so to speak, were a couple of people here at the Vineyard from small group offering to give perspective, to pray with me, to help sort out what was going on. I was really ready to walk away from business, to be quite honest. I'd had a couple-year experience that was so draining and so defeating that I was ready to kind of pack it up and go do something else. I didn't know what that might be. Maybe I was going to go back and be a landscaper with a wheelbarrow and a truck. But a couple members of the Vineyard, my brother Ben, Steve Vogelsang, David Hodge, again, guys from small group, surrounded me and encouraged me and prayed me through that moment and really restored me in a sense, so that I could believe again that yes, I was called. Yeah. God did care for me. There was a light on the other side of this darkness.
That's really powerful. And each of those names you mentioned, what I love about that is those weren't necessarily pastors. And I'm speaking as someone who's a pastor. Right. These were other business leaders doing life together as the church should, and bringing and speaking powerfully. And I know each of those individuals, and I know the kingdom perspectives that they carry. And I just love that example is, again, it's not about it has to be the church doing it because it's the pastor or somebody on staff who's done it, but it's because we did life together. Yeah, no, in a healthy way.
Having them, obviously as friends, but then in that specific moment, offering, very focused ministry, because they knew me so well that they could hear from the Holy Spirit and deliver the goods to help restore. That was powerful.
Yeah, I think just speaking of maybe a little bit more on that, this power so much speaks to the ability of saying you had people that you let into your life, that you let speak into both your life, your business, and the direction of where you're at. And I heard you talk about small group and that connection in that way. Could you speak a little bit more how important that is for business leaders to have that in their life?
Yeah, super essential. I don't actually know how business leaders ultimately succeed without a relatively close group offering accountability and encouragement and support. It's something I've been blessed to have really since being in business, all the way back, to those early days in the 1980s. Right. But it really was it's about making a choice, because, opening yourself up to people, both inside small group and out, is, can be a kind of dangerous thing, right? We have to make ourselves vulnerable. We have to be authentic, and so that people can see, sort of everything that's going on in there, the good, the bad, the ugly sometimes. And so, yeah, you do have you make the investment of time. You commit to go. You commit to hang out together, whether that's meeting at the local restaurant or whether it's meeting specifically in small group, wherever it might be. And yeah, as you do that, then you are surrounded by encouragement and coaching and so forth. And again, I honestly don't see how business people succeed without that.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I know in my own experience in the 13 years previously where I was in the business world before stepping into the church world, where God had to really convince me and push me in that place, I can reflect that same thing. I don't think I wouldn't have stepped into full-time ministry had it not been for people who were willing to speak into my life and encourage, because I loved the business world. I love doing that and still get to have, some places and pieces where I still get to connect with the business world, which sometimes feels like a lifeline when you're surrounded by, the pressures of ministry. I'm sure you experience the same.
Oh, yeah.
The same far beyond and leading a business. It's all kind of really the same kind of pressures and just from different places. But the power of people who can speak into your life, I think that's such a key principle, I think, as a takeaway, kind of for how we can lead well and create culture, because you can't create healthy culture when you're isolated from it.
Absolutely not.
And so I think that's a really powerful lesson, I think, that I'm hearing here. So what are ways that you think, how can the church better serve the business community and business leaders and people who are participating in that? And that's a huge chunk of the people who say, I am the church and I'm part of this. How do we better serve?
Yeah. That's a great question. The Vineyard, I think, has always been really open to trying new ideas, to being innovative and so forth. So I think we have a great foundation from which to start. And of course, we are trying some new ideas. And I think probably most of all, it's just to recognize that all of us are called, right, as believers. Most of us are not called to the classic definition of a full-time ministry, right? But yet we are all full-time ministers in a sense
100%.
Where we are. So I think if the church embraces that and weaves that into, sort of the infrastructure, so to speak, and into the messages and into, the programming that we have. So that's where it starts, acknowledging that we all have a calling, we're all ministers. And again, most of that is taking place out in the marketplace, again, either as a teacher, a nurse, a factory worker, a stay-at-home mom, a writer, whatever it may be. So I think start there. And then, just be open to innovating. I mean, I love what a couple of the guys are doing here, Phil and Jay, leading the Kingdom Entrepreneurs program, for instance. That's an innovative idea.
Yeah.
It's a place where folks in the business world, the marketplace, can gather and hear the stories from one another. We can pray for one another. We can be encouraged by that. So that's an example, I think, of a program, but it's probably larger than any one program, right? It's just adopting this understanding that our callings are diverse and again, encouraging us in that.
Yeah, and I love that idea too. People ask, well, what was it like to step from the business world and into full-time ministry? And really the way God saw it was you just stepped from one ministry to the next. It's really what it was.
Right.
I just get paid for something different now.
Right.
And that's, I think, really a helpful understanding when we think about it. We're not, and I think I see this weaved throughout your life, and what you've been talking about today is this, it's a fully integrated life.
Right.
It's not a separate, like, I do faith on one side and I do business on the other. I do faith and business are all one and the same.
Yeah, they're I think, the notion of different spheres, secular versus spiritual or secular versus sacred, that's a mistaken notion, right? And we see ultimately what happens when people compartmentalize their life, right? If they isolate off the work side or the personal side or whatever, that typically doesn't. Well, it may work for a little while, but it ultimately doesn't work over time. We are fully integrated human beings. That's the scriptural view. That's the Hebraic view, if you will. And so we need to think about all of life and work and so forth in that sense. We are integrated. We are one whole.
Love that. Well, as we're closing here, I just want to give you an opportunity. What would you say to encourage our church community from a business leader's perspective, somebody who's living in the place that you are, who sees so much what would you say to encourage our church community from your perspective?
Yeah, I'd say number one, know that your work matters to God. Your work itself is part of the plan that I call setting things right. And there's that phrase is used throughout all of Scripture, from the very beginning, historical books. It's woven through the prophets and through the Psalms and Proverbs. It's certainly in the New Testament, this idea that the world is broken and God is setting things right. God is using you in your work to set things right. So know that your work matters to God, number one. Number two, know that God is always at work.
That's good.
So we forget that sometimes. He is at work.
That's really good.
So keep your eyes and your ears peeled. Now, most of it's going to be very practical, just doing your job, again, as we said earlier, with excellence, with care for others, with a smile, with diligence, just showing up as opposed to, not. Those are really, really practical
Kind
things.
of important.
That's right. Now, God may throw in some God stops. There may be awesome moments to pray with someone or to, lead somebody to Christ. My good buddy David Hodge actually had that opportunity just last week.
Oh, wow.
Those are very cool God moments.
Yeah.
Most of work probably isn't going to be that tantalizing and exciting where, it appears something miraculous or amazing is happening, but yet God truly is at work in all of those other ways. And then, finally, I just say, remember that the creation mandate from Genesis 1:26 through 28 is still operating. And that's where God basically said, hey, Adam and Eve, the earth is yours. Now go, and the King James language says subdue it. I like what Eugene Peterson in the Message says, to go and take charge. So take charge of the creation in a godly way. Steward the opportunity that you have to take some slice of creation and do with it as God would do. That mandate, from thousands of years ago is still our mandate. That's what we're doing in our work. We're taking charge of some piece, whether it's big, medium, or really tiny. Doesn't make a difference, but know that is still happening, and it's across all kinds of jobs. Again, as we've explained here, can be any kind of a position, so to speak, but know that your calling is important to the fulfillment of that mandate.
Wow, love it. I don't think I've heard it said better. So well done. I appreciate that, Tim. So I appreciate you being willing to take your time. I know it's very valuable in those many hours that you're putting out to stop and to share. But I think it's a message that so many need to hear, and I think it's a message that many business leaders I know, coming from the business world, it was a message that I needed to hear, and I saw it lived out in your life. It's not just something that you talk about, but it's actually the way that you live your life, and I so appreciate that about you. If you want any more great wisdom from Tim Hoerr, again, feel free to check out his books, Thank God It's Monday and Risking It. I believe they're both available on Amazon.
They are,
should you want to, or even I think the church bookstore has them if you want to head over to the Vineyard Church. So thanks again for joining us here today.